Hi, and welcome to the Strangely Specific Movie Awards. I'm Drew D'Amelia, your host from Drew Under Review, and with me we have my friend who is a previous podcast partner. What's your name again?
My name is Brandon, and yes, I was in a past life.
You were. But, we've had many lives since then.
Yes.
As in, it's been, I think, a little over a year. So, and things are really different. Even just for the show, we're outside right now.
Yeah.
And you might hear some wind, some birds that really want to get in on this action.
Oh, yeah.
It is what it is. We're trying to be safe during these trying times. Yeah, and that is, of course... Sorry, I'm blank. What's going on again?
Everything.
Oh, okay, cool. Anyway, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
And just to recap, in case you don't know how this goes, I am going to have 3 different awards that we are going to have 2 nominees each, and they're going to be not your ordinary awards. In fact, they're going to be strangely specific awards. And Brandon, if you would like to, you can try to come up with perhaps one additional nominee that you want to throw in there. Everything makes sense? You ready to go?
Let's do this.
All right, so for our very first award, we have Best Outer Space Dance. Our nominees are La La Land and WALL-E.
Ooh. So similar yet so different.
I know.
I'm blanking on other films with this.
It's a surprisingly tough criteria. Doesn't it seem like there would be a lot for some reason?
They don't really dance in Star Wars, Star Trek. I haven't watched enough of it. Space Jam, nope.
And I'm not counting. It can't be dances on alien planets. It has to. Specifically
it has to
outer space.
A vessel outside or 0 Gs. Well, I posit this to you: the La La Land one is a fantasy sequence.
It is.
They float because they're at the planetarium, right?
They are, yes.
So they're at the planetarium. And they rise into the sky or the night sky in the planetarium viewing room, and they soar above the clouds, and it's very colorful and very nice.
Oh, it's beautiful.
But it technically is taking place on Earth. B, it's a fictionalization of such a dance. So can we really call it valid and legitimate?
It's a good question. The thing is, though, it is clearly ambiguous as to if it's taking place on Earth, because essentially they start floating. And you can interpret that maybe in the universe of La La Land, you can float for that one scene. I'm going to go ahead and say that at that moment on, it becomes a fantasy sequence, and maybe the background that they were dancing on top of, it was a fantasy sequence of being able to dance in the observatory. But I have a feeling that if they're fantasizing dancing, they're not going to limit themselves to, let's just dance in the conservatory. They're going to go to outer space. You know what I mean? I agree that it's ambiguous, but I imagine if we asked the director and writer of that movie, hey, Damien, what's going on? Was that outer space?
Or was our friend Damien Chazelle?
Yeah, I don't think he would opt to say, yeah, they definitely stayed in the Griffith Observatory.
Yeah.
Why the fuck would they leave? That just doesn't make sense. No. True. So, assuming that both of these movies fit the criteria, do you have any qualms with WALL-E?
Well, I don't have any qualms with WALL-E at all. In fact, as soon as you said that, I'd say hands down WALL-E wins, because that's easily my favorite segment from that movie. WALL-E is not my favorite Pixar movie by any stretch, but I do think it is one of the better animated films of Pixar's canon. And the fact that, there's not a lot of dialogue, at least in the first act of the movie, certainly not in other parts of the movie when they are on the spaceship. That sequence is just purely beautiful, like next to no dialogue, vibrant colors standing out against the backdrop of deep space. I say that wins by a mile, because dancing is a grounded activity, and the fact that they are floating through 0 Gs in both cases,
Yeah.
but the fact that it is actually happening between these two, non-humans, and furthermore, they're giving them human characteristics by having them dance and float together. I don't know. I believe the connection between WALL-E and Eve more than I do Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling.
Okay, I can definitely vouch for that. Let me just backtrack and agree with you that I do think the WALL-E dance sequence is beautiful. WALL-E is one of my favorite movies ever. It is so odd to me that the La La Land dance sequence is also beautiful to me. I don't find many movie moments beautiful, and maybe that's on me for not seeing the right movies, but the few amount of beautiful moments that I could pinpoint in movies is so weird that two of them are specifically outer space dance sequences. It's really odd. You'd think that by now there would be just a really unappealing outer space dance sequence, you know what I mean? But yeah, they're just both so great to look at. If you have no information and you're just seeing it in like a YouTube outer space dance sequence montage, you know, those, then it's great on its own. But I think you raise a good point of bringing context into it. I think they're both great movies, but I do think you feel way more for the characters of WALL-E and Eve than you do of
Whatever the names are. That's why I call them the actors' names.
Hold on, I can do this. I'm not kidding. I saw La La Land within this week. Hold on. Sebastian and Mia.
Yeah, Seb. Yeah.
Yes, but it took a while.
Yep.
It's not quite fair because I've seen WALL-E way more times than La
Right.
La Land.
What about the beauty speaks to you? Like, I don't mean to get like really do a deep dive of trying to understand what is beauty, why do we think things are beautiful, but just what about them that is beautiful speaks to you and makes you consider them beautiful.
In both movies?
Yeah, sure, because I mean, you seem to say because they are similar by your own admission.
Unfortunately, you have failed. That is incredibly deep if you were trying not to be. But let me try to give the most superficial answer to that deep question that I can. In La La Land, I think that it's, even though I don't feel too much for the characters, it is a really great personification of romance. And love is a beautiful thing, and they're literally soaring and going beyond themselves, which I feel is what love often feels like. And yeah, they're also dancing very gracefully. The whole thing just, it makes you a romantic, if for a moment. Honestly, it's kind of the exact same thing with WALL-E. Because it's an unrequited love story between WALL-E and Eve, and they're not quite in love yet in this moment, but there's definitely a level of affection that hadn't been there previously. And Eve is not the kind of character that would really dance. In fact, WALL-E isn't either, but they're both discovering things, and I love it in WALL-E because they pair the dance sequence with the captain who's been learning about customs on Earth, asking the robot that's been teaching him things to find dancing, which is actually what the music, which I love this music, is titled, that plays over this scene. And it's just married so well. So does that give you a picture of why I think they're beautiful?
Yeah, I think so.
My
vote is still WALL-E.
I think I have to agree with you and give it to WALL-E. I like both, but it's really on the strength of the storytelling that I think the outer space dance sequence of WALL-E takes it to that next level.
I agree with you there. I didn't realize on the score that is what that sequence is titled. Having not seen WALL-E in a bit, I also forgot that's that the captain was sort of involved in the same thing.
Yeah, the captain did not dance himself
no, he
in
did
outer
not.
space.
He didn't.
Which I feel like that would have brought it down.
I don't know that he could.
No, probably not.
Yeah.
No, gravity would be, or what is it? Zero G's would be doing
Yes.
a lot of the legwork for him.
Correct.
Because he literally couldn't himself.
Exactly.
But anyway, all right. Congratulations to WALL-E
Yes.
on your award. Let's move on to the next award, though, which is going to be most unpleasant consequences to elevator doors opening. We have The Departed and The Cabin in the Woods. Are you familiar with both of these movies?
I've seen both. Yeah.
All right, perfect. I have not seen both. I saw The Cabin in the Woods fairly recently. The Departed, it's been a bit. But I really like both movies, which I guess that's a theme going on. I happen to really adore all the nominees so far.
And now let me just take a step back. your criteria for this, does the award go to how bad the consequences are, or how bad in terms of the story, or I'm not doing a very good job asking this question.
I know what you're asking. I suppose the way that it's phrased, most unpleasant consequences. So those are probably the two key words, unpleasant and consequences. And I think it's ambiguous how you define it, and we can definitely talk about how we might define it personally. I will say this much. I have unique experiences with both of these elevator door opening sequences.
Oh, do you?
I do. For The Departed, long before I had seen the movie, I had heard about it. And I just saw a video on YouTube in my recommendations. It was way back in the day. That was The Departed elevator scene. And I went, what the hey? And I watched it, not being aware that it was an enormous spoiler for the entire movie. Now, I still love The Departed, having seen it since multiple times, but I can't help but wonder, what would it have been like had I seen The Departed without having that spoiled for me for the first time? And I will never really know, Brandon, but
I can speculate. Knowing how you are with shockers in movies, you would have been like,
That's true. That's a great point. I probably would have been very, very shocked. And it was very unpleasant. I'm not a big fan of Leo as an actor, but his character I cared enough about. I was definitely rooting for his character, and boy, was that unpleasant. That was really unpleasant that you had the bad guy in the situation, as far as you knew at that moment, win the whole movie. And for a few scenes afterwards, that's what it felt like. Fuck, that sucks. It's very unpleasant. However, in The Cabin in the Woods, when those elevator doors opened, I would call that maybe the most horrifying thing I've ever seen in a movie.
I would 1,000% agree with you.
Okay. Now, I love it, which is not the same for...
I don't.
It's not the same for other horrifying things, because I guess it depends on how it hits me, but that was so horrifying in a way where I wanted to watch it over and over again. Where sometimes things are horrifying in a way where I'm just like, I do not want to see this ever again. And I guess it depends on how far removed I can feel from it. Obviously, with so many monsters coming out like that, I'm thinking I don't want these people to go through this, but also it's probably not going to happen to me. I don't think, though. That's a huge suspension of disbelief.
So my trouble with Cabin in the Woods is, I have no desire to see that movie again. Like, I don't really dig horror movies. I understand this was a horror comedy deconstruction. Cool. When that scene happened, and really, as certain characters die, shall we say, it just leaves me with a sense of unpleasantness and dread. And I'm like, this isn't why I watch movies. It's interesting. It is cool. I'm in maybe a minority position where I'm actually on the antagonist side in Cabin in the Woods.
Wow.
So to see that happen to them, I'm like, well, they're trying to save the world. Because by releasing those elevator doors and letting out that parade of horrors, they stymie, albeit the bad guys, efforts to prevent the world from, well, you'd have to see the movie to watch, but bad stuff happens.
We can probably spoil it.
Can we? To prevent the world from ending.
Yeah.
The world ending is, I think, not as bad as a few criminals in the greater Boston area losing their life.
That's true. And that's where it comes down to, it'll be very interesting to decide how we define unpleasant. Because for me, I agree that I would rather have teenagers die than the end of the world. But in terms of the movie, I kind of look at it from a writing perspective, and I'm like, that felt like the right ending for the story that was being told.
Oh, sure. Doesn't mean I have to like the story.
That's true. But I could also say, isn't The Departed very similar in that it's kind of bleak and the bad guys win?
Yeah, it is. I don't know. I just felt what it was trying to say about, criminal activity and corruption in the police and just all that stuff. I'm probably not the most qualified person to speak on The Departed, though I do kind of like it. Like I just felt a stronger connection to the characters. You could see the bad in both. Where in Cabin in the Woods, it's just like, oh, here's our protagonists. They have no fault other than being in the wrong cabin in the woods at the wrong time.
Yeah. And that is a good point. You really, for the most part, don't have a reason to want the teenagers to die other than it's a sacrifice that must happen.
Exactly.
So, boy, it's tough.
Mm-hmm.
It's really tough. Mm-hmm. I'm hurting my own brain thinking about this. And then there's the other thing that I inadvertently brought up. It's like, well, should unpleasant be something that you want to see over and over again? Or does it kind of cease to be that unpleasant after a while? Because maybe it's unpleasant, but kind of enjoyable. So how do you define unpleasant?
Well, the way I would define it is both in the story, which we've already talked about, as well as how unpleasant it is for you, the viewer. Yeah, it's unpleasant in The Departed, but it seems fitting, and when things are fitting, at least for me, then it's sort of dulled. Not to say it does always entirely. In Cabin in the Woods, like I said, this is just me, and I'm really introducing a lot of subjectivity into here. I just not a big fan of just horrible things, just being dismembering and scary stuff, and just all that. Like,
all right.
I don't know.
So I think that I feel that both of these elevator door scenes were fitting for the stories that were being told. And it sounds like you agree, but you prefer the Departed story because that's a story you would rather have told. I don't think the Departed is quite as down on humanity as the Cabin in the Woods
Not
is.
as down, but down.
And I can agree with that. I think for me, the way I'm going to make this decision is I am going to go with less the context and more which was the most just unpleasant for me to experience. And even though I did not experience the elevator scene of The Departed the way that I should have, as you brought up, you can imagine how I would have experienced it. And I feel that it's important to try to imagine that. And I think I would have found that more unpleasant than in The Cabin in the Woods, because in The Cabin in the Woods, it was deeply unpleasant, the most horrifying movie scene I've ever seen. But it was fun. And they were the bad guys for me, and I know you were rooting for them. I didn't really care. So I think I have to give it to The Departed for those reasons. And it sounds like you're giving it to The Departed for kind of different reasons than I am.
I'm giving it to Cabin in the Woods.
What? Oh! Hold on.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Maybe that logically makes sense. My brain is just not putting this together.
No, yeah.
That's true. That's true. Wow,
guess-
that's right. You would be giving it to Cabin in the Woods
yes, I would.
because this is hurting my brain now. So, but yes, because you were rooting for the bad guys in the Cabin in the Woods, but I was not really rooting for the bad guys. So we're at an impasse here.
Yep. I guess it's a wash.
I guess it's a wash, but we got to give it to someone. So I'm just going to side with you. Congratulations to the Cabin in the Woods.
Cool.
I'm going to take back everything I said. It's
Glad
the most,
ties go to the guest here.
it's the most unpleasant. So therefore, it has to win, right? There we go. Just ignore everything that I said in the last few minutes. So congratulations.
We'll edit this out. Yeah.
Congratulations to the Cabin in the Woods. All right. We have one last award that we are going to deliberate, Brandon, and that is going to be worst haircut. Oh, my goodness. We have Les Miserables, the movie version from 2012, and we have Sweeney Todd, Demon Barber of Fleet Street. And I maybe you could come up with another alternative. I'm not sure. It's surprisingly difficult for me to, because I suppose it's up for interpretation, and the award should have been more specific if it wanted to be. But when I think haircut, I think the process of getting a haircut, not necessarily the results, because I think in that instance, you call it bad hairdo or bad hairstyle, but I do think it's fair to extend it to, you don't have to see the haircut to have a worst haircut.
So, and by your own logic, you're sort of expanding from head hair to also include facial hair. So we're roping in
Yes.
salons and barbers alike.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
I think that counts. I wouldn't just say though, oh, that character has a really bad hairstyle, so that counts as a bad haircut. I feel like it needs to be implied that a haircut took place. You don't
Oh,
necessarily need
just
to.
implied then, not on screen.
I mean, I guess it's up for debate. I would prefer it be on screen, but I think if it's implied that it happened, that's probably good enough to be a contender.
That's fair. I mean, there had to be some real implicit subtlety there, and I'm not quite thinking of anything else. Everything has pretty much been live. The two examples that you gave.
Yeah.
Worst haircut. I can't think of. I'm gonna try to think of other nominees, but I don't have confidence. But why don't you start parsing out the two you've mentioned?
Sure. It's first thing I should mention is that a question I ask is, all right, Sweeney Todd. Well, Sweeney Todd gave a couple different haircuts, so it's kind of tough to choose exactly which haircut is nominated here because it's not clear. Sweeney Todd has moments where he gives very good haircuts. It's like, wow, that's very impressive. But he also has moments where he gives very bad haircuts that involve in throats being slit, which is not the mark of a good haircut, I would say.
Yeah, it's quite the opposite.
And you could argue that Sweeney Todd did exactly what he intended to do, but I think the mark of a good haircut is hair being cut. And as far as I can, maybe he cut their hair before cutting their throats. I don't think he did. I'm pretty sure he didn't. So that feels like a really bad haircut. But you got to be considering which haircut is being referred to. I would say probably the bad haircuts, because that's what you're going to theaters to see. It's nominated for worst haircut, so why would the really good haircut be a nominee? You know what I mean? So that seems pretty bad. Let's think about the Les Mis haircut. It's definitely very sad. It's this woman that has just been on a horrible downward spiral, and she sells her hair before entering into prostitution.
And teeth.
Yes, that happens too. Though I do think you have to consider the order in which it happens, because I believe her hair was cut before the prostitution.
Yes, but not before teeth.
You think?
I'm remembering her hair being long when they were pulling it out with pliers.
Yeah, it's I don't quite remember, but it's funny because exactly how miserable was she? Because I think if she had done prostitution,
How miserable, Drew? Trey.
yeah, Trey miserable. If she had done prostitution, then gotten the haircut, then that would have been an especially upsetting haircut. Because listen, the haircut itself, clearly not good, not professionally done. It just didn't look that great. Although you could say, Fontaine kind of pulled it off. She didn't look too bad with short hair, but it wasn't great. But I think that it's the experience of the haircut that should also be taken into account. And had it been after everything terrible that happened to her and she got that haircut, that would be a really that'd be like the worst thing that ever happened to you. And in most contests, that would probably win. But the only thing worse than that is probably getting your throat cut open. So, yeah, I feel like it's unfortunate because the Fontaine haircut was really, really bad, and yet had just the right competition to edge it out in my book. And yes, it is true that the Les Mis haircut, it happened before the prostitution, so you can argue, well, she hasn't been forced into prostitution yet, so is it really that bad? It's still a very bad haircut. But also, it is still, to me, not as bad as your life being ended.
For going back to our discussion of context, I think it's very important in this, whereas we have, in both cases, a protagonist, or Fontaine is a kind of protagonist, I suppose. One is experiencing their hair being cut. The other is the titular demon barber of Fleet Street and is administering haircuts.
Ooh.
So, our object action subject, I guess, is sort of flipped in both examples.
That's true. I think we should be focusing on the subject.
In Sweeney Todd, he kills I don't know, scores of gentlemen. Though not everyone. There is the scene in the film where he does just shave a gentleman who is there with his wife and child.
I think he gives approximately on screen 2 very good haircuts, and then the rest are very murderous.
I counter with, well, depends on your definition of on screen. I was going to counter with 3, but I'll lower it to 2.5 because
I know what
he
you mean.
shaves the gentleman at Pirelli's challenge, though the camera is on him when he apparently cuts his beard in 5 strokes of his blade. He shaves Judge Turpin when they sing Pretty Women, but then Anthony rushes in and then Judge Turpin leaves in an irate state. And then there's the montage example that I just mentioned.
Yeah. I do not believe that the Justice had all of the haircut by the time that he stormed out. I believe it was a partial haircut. So
I thought that he shaved a full shave, just saying, let me shave him in full before I actually do the deed. But I could be wrong.
from what I remember, I think the neck part was shaven, but there was still shaving cream on his face when he got up in a huff. I'm like,
Yeah,
okay,
sometimes that can
I
happen.
get you're angry, Justice, but let him finish the haircut. Like, come on. I know you have to get to kidnapping your daughter, but jeez, like priorities, buddy.
That was a weird show.
Yeah. And it is interesting that these are both musicals.
Oh, God, they are musicals.
Yeah, they both had very famous stage productions. Very odd.
Uh-huh.
But I don't think you don't need to think about Sweeney Todd. Sweeney Todd gave a bad haircut, but Fontaine received a bad haircut. I'm thinking about the recipient of the haircuts.
You are thinking of the recipients.
And
Yeah.
the recipients for Sweeney Todd died.
Uh-huh.
So
But their hair wasn't cut. They were.
that's true. But they did go in intending to get a haircut. The pretense
Oh,
was
okay.
this is a haircut.
So you are treating haircut as an event and not the action.
Yes.
Okay.
I intend to have my hair cut, or at the even if you don't intend it, it is happening. You know, like if someone went in and got their throat cut, and which did happen in Sweeney Todd, somebody came in and did not intend to have the haircut and just got their throat slit.
Yep.
That I would not call a haircut.
No.
That was just a murder. But for all the other ones, it's haircut with a murder. it's different.
Yeah, I mean, well, one woman's plight is very sad and severe and, very unfortunate and miserable, but, like, it's a lot of bodies. It's a lot of blood.
You want to give it to Fontaine because you feel so bad
I
for
feel so
her.
bad.
And you don't really know these murder victims, but
No, you don't.
you kind of have to still say murders
You know,
worse.
two of them, ultimately.
Though, okay, that is an interesting question.
3, I guess.
Murder is worse, but who do you actually feel the worst for? Like,
Well-
do you really feel that bad for these murder victims that you know nothing about, or do you feel worse for Fontaine?
I don't feel bad for 2 of them.
That's true.
The rest, I'm like, who were these guys?
Oh my goodness!
You know?
I did not think I would be the one to bring the hammer down in this way, but if I'm being, I feel worse for Fontaine. Because yes, there are people getting their throats cut open. I'm like, that's macabre. I'm just kind of thinking, oh, this is crazy. I don't really feel bad for them. So if you're defining worst haircut by just the emotional quality that's attached to it, which you wouldn't think that's how you would define a worst haircut.
No.
I think I feel worse for Fontaine.
I feel worse for Fontaine, and it's sort of twofold. One, her context, obviously, but 2 for Sweeney Todd, and this goes back to my connection with characters. Those that lose their life at the hands of Mr. Todd are the antagonists and supporting antagonist, a kind of antagonist at the beginning, and the rest, you don't know who they are.
Yeah.
Now that's
Exactly.
Now you might say, well, they were innocent. Yes, they were, and you feel bad, but you feel worse for Fontaine because you have an emotional connection that sort of, well, let me also say that Les Mis does not do a good job developing their characters as well as the musical.
I'm more familiar with the movie than the musical.
Or the book.
I want to reread the book, but yeah, I don't think the movie musical was great about it. And yet, I do still think I felt more for Fontaine.
I'm inclined to give it to Fontaine by a hair.
Did you intend that?
Yes.
Do you mean it? Is it truly a hair?
I do.
Wow, I don't think it's quite a hair for me, but it
is from that. Like, do I feel bad? Yeah, but that's because I cannot help but bring in what I know from the show and having read the book and just putting that on this performance and just like, well,
yeah, no, I know what you mean.
You're not doing a good job, movie, but it's there.
And as someone that was less familiar with the book and the musical, both of which I had seen, but I'm just more familiar with the movie musical, I still feel that it's potent enough, even with everything that it lacks. And it is so odd, because if you think about it, we're saying murder is not as bad. But it's important to say this is in the context of movies, not real life. If these are documentaries, I think the result would be a little bit different.
Musical documentary, I'll be damned.
Now, allegedly, Sweeney Todd is maybe true, but probably not. I think it's like a legend.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But Les Mis is based on true events.
Is it?
Yeah, the 1832 revolt.
I thought
in
you meant
Paris.
all the characters are based on true.
No.
Yeah, I knew the revolt was true. I'm shocked, but Les Miserables is the winner of the worst haircut award. Wow. So congratulations to all our winners. Brandon, did you have a good time?
I did have a good time. This was good.
Yeah, it's cool being outside. Maybe I'll do it more often when, we don't have to restrict ourselves to only being outside when millions of people are dying. But hopefully less people will die, and hopefully you have enjoyed what you have heard here today. Thank you so much for donating to Drew and a Review. I really appreciate your patronage. Brandon, thank you so much for being here. And we will see you next time on the Strangely Specific Movie Awards. Brandon, will you be here next time?
I hope so, but thanks for having me today.
Will you be listening at least?
I will definitely be listening.
All right, that's cool. Because if you weren't listening, then I would just erase this entire episode.